Hi, I'm Dave Allardyce and welcome to my guide through the world of Scotch whisky. So first of all, what is whisky? A whisky is a spirit distilled from fermented grains. So what makes a whisky a Scotch whisky? Well, there's a few rules, but the most important one is that it's made in Scotland. It's got to be aged for at least 3 years in oak casks that are less than 700 litres. And the whisky has to be bottled at least 40% ABV. There are two main categories in Scotch whisky: single malt and blended. Single malt, let's break that down. Single stands for single distillery. Malt stands for malted barley, it's the only grain we're allowed to use. Scotch means the whisky is made in Scotland. And whisky, of course, is a spirit distilled from fermented grains. And in the single malt world, we distill in batches using copper pot stills. The other main category, blended Scotch, is a little different. You're taking two different types of spirit using two different types of distillation. The first being the single malts we just spoke of. The second being a continuous distillation, typically using wheat as the base grain. Blenders will then take these spirits, combine them together to their specification. Another category of Scotch whisky is blended malts. So a blended malt is basically taking different single malts and blending them together. There are many different elements in the whisky making process that will affect the flavour of your whisky. I want to talk about two of the most important ones. One, the grain, and two, the casks. So with grains, we're talking about malted barley. To dry the malted barley, you need to use a fire. And often distilleries would have used peat as the fuel source in the fire. Now what is peat? Peat is decomposed tree and plant matter found in fields in Scotland. If you use peat as your fuel source, you may end up with quite a smoky or peaty whisky.
Hello there, friend. Pour yourself a glass of whiskey and throw some more peat on the fire.
Many distilleries have moved away from using peat to dry the barley and now use smokeless coal, which doesn't influence a smoky character into the barley. Probably the most important way that we impart flavour into Scotch whisky is through maturation in oak casks. In Scotland we use two main types of oak. We use Spanish oak, which are also known as ex-sherry casks, and we use American oak, which is typically known as an ex-bourbon cask. Typically going to give you a sweeter flavour profile. People think about things like vanilla, toffee, caramel. Spanish oak or European oak is going to give you flavours of dried fruit such as raisins, and it's also going to give you a much darker, deeper reddish colour. So people are always asking me, Dave, how do you drink Scotch whisky? Well, I'm glad you asked. So some people like to drink it neat. Some like to add a little water. Or a lot. Some people like to add ice, maybe even mix it up into a cocktail. It's up to you. Just make sure that if you're drinking whisky, you're drinking Scotch whisky. Slanjava. Or a lot.